test 1, 2. Recording in progress.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this special council meeting, a budget meeting for West Perth Council. First of all, I think we'll open with a moment of reflection. Okay, thank you. All right, the first item on the agenda is the confirmation of the agenda. We have a mover and seconder to confirm the agenda. Moved by Councillor Vink. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, that is carried. So the next item then would be the acceptance of the agenda, right? So a motion to accept the agenda as it was circulated. Moved by Councillor Tam, seconded by Councillor Duck. All those in favor? That is carried. So being that it is a budget meeting, I guess first thing is, does anybody have a conflict of interest with anything on the agenda? Seeing none, being that it is a budget meeting, I'll turn it over to our budget chair, Deputy Mayor Ait.
Thank you, Mayor, very much, Mayor McKenzie. So I guess we're going to start with Wendy in reports, or Jeffrey. Jeff's going to start.
Thank you, Budget Chair. I will just offer a few opening remarks, and then I'm going to turn the meeting over to Wendy to present a series of reports, and the reports will guide us through the discussion for the budget. I want to start out by very quickly acknowledging the efforts of Wendy McMurray and her team in completing the analysis that was necessary to put together the budget package before you. The package articulates the budget situation of the municipality, and it's a tough year for budget for a number of reasons that are outlined in the package. And I want to say that Wendy has done a great job with this, her first budget here at West Perth. And treasurers are always left being the one that has to deliver the message. And the treasurer is, in this case, put in that position. It's been supported by information from all the departments, but Wendy has done a great job putting it all together for presentation to council tonight and in the reports that you reviewed on the weekend. This meeting is a culmination of several budget meetings dating back as far as November 22nd, 2021, when we had a strategic session, and up until including a number of reports that you're seeing tonight for the first time that are the final pieces to put together the budget. In reports that have been presented in the past, Wendy's package has done a good job of providing those highlights. We certainly won't go back through the reports that we presented in the past, but the highlights are in the budget report package that was sent out on Friday afternoon. As you'll see in the budget package, we've identified the capital and operating requirements of the municipalities. The reports outline a higher than expected levy requirement for 2022 and outline the reason why this requirement has come before us. The higher than expected levy requirement is directly related to operating pressures. And as we've advised council in the reports, those operating pressures were masked by a lack of financial information about the 2019 year, which was not available for us for the 2020 year. And this was further aggravated by a lack of year-end information for 2019 and financial information for 2020 when council deliberated and approved the 2021 budget. Those factors combined with a case where we brought revenue in, financing revenue in twice as an error in the 2021 budget, again masked the operating pressures. And Wendy has gone to great lengths to specify those operating pressures, to track the pressure between the 2019 and 2022 budgets, and to provide council in the last report with a series of scenarios, which Wendy will outline, that talk about the immediate choices for levy and the consequences that has in reserves, and also the downstream impacts of levy amounts that we may choose to levy now, or levy amounts that we may choose to levy later. And that information really is, I think, the destination for tonight's meeting with council in terms of being able to make a good choice about what's best for the community and what's best for the financial position of the municipality. And with that, I'd like to turn the speaker over, or the microphone over to Wendy, and let Wendy outline the reports and guide questions.
Well, thanks, Jeff. I'm just going to share my screen. And you want my camera on? Okay. So the first 5 reports are for information, and I can just quickly go over them as a quick overview and then take any questions on those first 5 if you like. So the first report, and Jeff kind of gave us a great introduction. So the levy requirement for 2022 is coming in at $10,495,809. And this is an increase from last year of $1,790,004. Sorry, $1,790,004. And so this, in looking at the comparison between the 2 years, oh, sorry, can you guys hear me? Is that better? Sorry. Do you want me to start again? Okay. So in looking at kind of where the pressures were coming in, we looked at the differences between 2019 and 2022. And in looking at that, we kind of removed the capital projects to help us kind of, in those capital projects being the ones that are kind of isolated as being the Henry Street Bridge, the fire hall, and the admin building, just for comparisons. And then through that, we were able to find some issues that were masking kind of the levy requirements. And so in 2019, the levy requirement was just a little more than 8 million. And in 2022, we're looking at the 10 million for. So you can see that there's been a bit of an adjustment between those years. And so essentially, when we looked at the differences between the two, we came up with $2.4 million. And in the pie chart here kind of demonstrates the areas that kind of stuck out to us to identify and to bring to your attention what those requirements or changes were. And so in the general government, which is basically the CAO's office, the clerks and finance department, there was an increase in staff capacity, being additional staff in the finance department and the HR coordinator, and then just some general wage and merit increases over time. And then the debt requirements coming in at 11%, which is the financing of the Henry Street Bridge and the fire hall. And then the OMPF, which is Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund, which is grants that we get that's unconditional. In those span of 2019 to 2022, there's been a 20% cut in funding. And then in transportation, we identified a 28% increase between that same span. And we identified basically it was the wages and merit increases, increase in gravel cost. We reallocated insurance premiums and the increased costs in materials and contractor costs. And there was some equipment transfers that happened last year into reserves. In recreation, we identified 37% increase. This was partly due to the loss of revenue and increased costs due to COVID. We saw Darcy took over the parks as well. And we did some increased reserves to transfers in 2022. There was some capital spikes in this department, and they were projects that were coming from the arena chiller, community center siding and installation, the arena electrical panel and the Ketterson Pavilion, which is happening in 2022. Just kind of skip down to the next report. It's kind of like identifying the dates that things were presented to you guys. And again, we're not going to kind of rehash those, but those were there for quick references for you. Again, the OMPF grant funding, you can see in this slide that there's been a decrease, as mentioned before. And then the other pressure was the insurance premium. Sorry about that. The insurance premium, and I think West Perth definitely, we're not seeing the increases that other municipalities have been seeing. Across Ontario, there's been increases upwards to 20%. And this year, our increase was 12.6%, and ours was largely due to adding new infrastructure. The assessment growth report that just I'm going to highlight that we have an additional $113,450 in taxation to draw from due to assessment growth. And then some of the budget pressures that we identified just in this year are highlighted in those bullet points. One being the budgeting for write-offs. We know that there's going to be changes from farm to residential. And we've offset that a little bit with some supplemental billing. And supplementals are a result of building permits coming through, and then MPAC going through and assessing those and changing and adding assessment growth due to building permits or barns, etc. Wages we identified as approximately $235,000 increase on the budget. Again, insurance, loss in OMPF. There was an increase in donations, 38,000 or 34,800. Drains, we saw an increase in our requirement, and we went through the engineer's reports and pulled out the estimated costs for the municipality, and those would be either on our lands or our roads. And then we had some development related capital at 138,000. And then we saw a loss in revenue for the month of January and possibly February. And we are estimating roughly 35,000 there. And then we had the principal and interest payment for the fire hall and Henry Street Bridge at 130. And so these pressures alone amounted over to $1 million. And with that increase alone, it was coming in at 12.44%. So the next report, I'll just quickly go through that. We just kind of looked at the average property. Shouldn't say average, it's the median property for West Perth. And we draw that from Opta or on online property tax analysis. And so in this table here, you can see the different property types and their median values. They are lower than what maybe what people think they will be at, but that is based off of impacts hasn't reassessed yet. And so these values are at the 2016 values. So the median does seem low, but that is what we're pulling from Opta. So here's if you were to take a West Perth property and you were to apply our neighboring municipalities' tax rate, this is what they would pay in those cities or towns. And so when we looked at this, West Perth kind of fits in between North Perth and Perth East. We're not the lowest, but we're not the highest. And to be comparable, we included the county's rate because we have upper tier or single tier municipalities being Stratford and St. Mary's. So it makes it comparable. We did include the education. And then the last report the second last report would be the budget changes. So from what you were presented in February, there's been an additional $2 million that we were able to decrease the budget by. And so here's just a a report that outlines those changes. And so just on a high level, there were 8 departments that had no changes. And there are those 8 right here that I'm circling, which are council, mobility bus, streetlights, planning services, economic development, heritage and community grants, energy and environmental services, and drainage. Then there's self-funding ones that if there's been changes, they balance out to 0. But we didn't see a lot of changes in these. Building department, streetlights, the BIA, wastewater, and water. And then at the time we were presenting in February, we didn't have the distribution available for the insurance. So there was a small adjustments to protective services, cemeteries, libraries, wetlands, and trails just for insurance purposes. And then the higher item ones that we were identified were general administration, fire, transportation services, solid waste, parks and recreation, arena, and pool. And so down below there's tables. So I'll just kind of zip down to general government. Oops. So under general government, we adjusted the write-off supplemental balance. Just felt with COVID restrictions lifting off, it would give a chance for MPAC to get out and do some of those evaluations. So we anticipate that our supplementals will help balance off our write-offs. And it was identified that the penalty and interest of 115 wasn't added. It was omitted in the Excel spreadsheet. There was a small adjustment for insurance. And then we funded all the modernization intake 3 projects from reserves. Sorry, and then the fire department, the major change in there was we brought the carry forward projects from 2021, and they're being funded through the reserves now. And then there was an increase in insurance. And then any departments that we saw that there was an increase to reserve from 2021, and we removed those. So we reduced the contribution to the reserve for the fire department of $114,467. And then transportation, that had a significant change, and Mike reviewed that, and we reduced the winter control by $90,000. That was the snow plowing and sanding and salting. His insurance increased on the transportation facilities by $14,000 and equipment by $4,800. There was an increase in IT networking, so he brought on Street Logic application, so those support fees are showing up in the 2022 budget. There was some changes to the grants, just to making sure that the grants were all approved. Don't get me wrong there, but it was just the amount that was in the spreadsheet that got adjusted. So we increased the provincial grants by 86. And in filing for the connecting links, we changed, oh, sorry, that's another note, sorry. So there was an error on the Excel spreadsheet. The connecting links was showing up at 524 when in fact that project is complete. So that was a change on the budget. Then there was a bunch of carry forward projects that were approved in prior meetings. And so those made an increase in reserves. Then we had tender results come in for the Henry Street Bridge, or Henry Street reconstruction, and the Georgina Street. So those have been identified. And then because we had additional funding in OCFA, we added line 46, but due to the budget situation, we removed that addition, and we realigned the grant to be part of funding line 29 or 21. And then the Ontario Street grant, we did the final submission, and so we were able to finalize those numbers. And so that was a change of $6,000 on the budget. And solid waste had a small change. There was the insurance, but then they reduced the building maintenance for solid waste for $24,600. And then in parks, just parks in general, which includes Ketterson, Lions, tennis courts, passive parks, skateboard park, the Dublin and the South Hibbert, the Chamber of Commerce, Fullerton Ballpark, and the Kinsman Park. Those are just adjustments due to insurance. And then since presenting in February, we received another grant. It's been identified as the shuffleboard grant. So it increased revenue by $15,000. And then for the arena, there was an increase to the Seaforth Arena agreement. So that's been incorporated into this change. And then there was insurance change. And then again, there was a $200,000 contribution to the reserve. So that was been removed. And also the continuation of that repair on the siding and insulation project. And then the pool and splash pad, it was just the insurance change. And then again, we decreased the $20,000 to contribute to the pool reserve. And then they deferred the skateboard project for another year. So those all get summarized in a chart at the very bottom of this report. Oops. So all those changes reduce the levy requirement by the $2 million there that you see. So then the final report, just for information, is the reserves. And in here, I'll just highlight that we kind of restructured the reserves, and hopefully we made some assumptions, so hopefully we did okay there. But we identified the reserve funds, obligatory, deferred revenue, and the tangible capital asset, and the equity in government, just to help identify where those funds are and how they're distributed and broken down. And so reserve funds are less restrictive, so they do require council's approval to move money in and out. Reserve funds are kind of controlled by bylaw. So again, council has the authority to change those. The obligatory and deferred revenue funds are, let me just pull that up. Those ones are your development charges and your parkland. So they have other restrictions based off of legislation. And then you have your Huron Park reserve, which is land inventory. And then you have your equity in government, which is your investment into West Perth Power. So at this time, I gladly take any questions on those 5 reports. I know it's a lot of information and tried to summarize it for you. But if there's any questions on those, I'd gladly take them.
Okay, we're looking for questions for Wendy on those 5 reports. Mike, Tam?
Is there any money left, Wendy, in the COVID funding that we had? Like, I'm just looking at where the arena was down $35,000 for the ice in the hall.
Sorry. No, there is no COVID funding left. It was all used up. We could maybe bring a report back to you showing where we allocated those costs to. I think the increase in security ate those funds up that we did have. Off the top of my head, I can't quite think of where we allocated it prior to that.
Anyone else? Ryan, Mr. Duck?
Is there any chance of recovering any of the revenue from the arena being open the additional month now that we've kind of voted to do that?
I don't know how much extra revenue there was, because I know extending the ice, there may be additional revenue. but I don't think it's going to make a significant difference to the requirement. If there was an extra $10,000, it's not going to make a big percentage difference. Does that help answer your question?
Darcy, if you're chiming in, could you, like, I know actually our arena will probably run at a further loss for the month of April. Can you pop on here?
Yeah, I'm here now, Doug. Yes, I would I would agree that there will be additional revenue with it, but there will be additional expenses, and probably the expenses will outweigh the revenue. So we won't see it as a positive on the budget.
Thank you, Darcy. Wendy, I saw your Seaforth Arena, but I never saw the Moncton Arena in here. We generally have to pay, but that maybe would be finalized. Dean, from 2021, they would have posted a loss, but I didn't see it in here as I saw Seaforth. Wendy's got her finger up, her index finger.
Darcy, I don't know if you quickly know what line that is on your budget or what department that falls under.
Yes, I'm just looking it up right now, the exact line. It is seven. So Elma Logan 7,000, 7,000. So it's in the bottom of the arena. It will be. It's budgeted 152,421 for 2022, and it was 125 for 2021.
Yeah, that number's been confirmed by North Perth, so it's already included in the budget.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else have any questions for Wendy or Darcy or anyone? Seeing none, we need a motion just to accept the report from the treasurer's report. And as we move on, I need a motion by Murray Rose, seconded by Sherry Bell. All in favor? Carried. So now we'll move on to donations. Wendy again.
I'm just going to share my screen 1 second. Okay, so this is the donation report, and in there basically is all the requests that came in under the new donation policy, and all the information regarding the asks are listed under background in the report. And there is a recommendation there for council to consider all of the groups that participated and applied, and their full amounts are listed in the recommendation.
So at this point, do we want to go through them one at a time?
Sure. The resolution is made for all of them. So if there's ones that you want to pull apart and or pull out separately or discuss.
Dean, did you have a question?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I would like to go through these one by one and review the amounts that are being asked for and have a discussion on whether we wish to accept those donation requests individually by each group.
Okay, would you like me to go through it, Wendy, or would you like to? Nicholas would like me to go through it. So the Broadhaven Chamber of Commerce, we generally every year give them $3,500 for lawn cutting. And this year they've asked for an extra $5,000 because of the COVID, the lack of income that they have is how I'm going to say it. Obviously they couldn't rent their hall either. They still had to pay the heat and the hydro. Everything had to be done there, similar to ours. Any questions on that one? Seeing none. The second one is the Mitchell Fish and Game Club. There was a presentation by Chris Watt. That was January 24th, I believe we said. The funds would be used for the green energy retrofit to the clubhouse. Currently, the property has no hydro service, installing a solar system, and that's what they're looking at. Anybody have any? Sorry, I got bad eyes. Anybody have any questions on that, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, I would like us to hold off on this grant for the time being. I would like to see a business plan for this. When they made the presentation, really don't know what they're doing with that. They talked about putting in solar panels. I think the question was asked at that time, what would it cost to put a hydro line in? And they had not investigated that. I think we need to know exactly what some of these costs are before we make a final donation.
Mr. Trentowski?
Mr. Chair, I would concur with Mayor McKenzie's comments, 100%.
Nicholas?
Would you guys mind setting some money aside until we get that plan back? Because I think it's a good opportunity for them to continue the work that they're doing, supporting the community and the projects that they're working on. Would that be all right to set it aside until that $10,000 until they have a report back for us?
Sure.
I guess we could set it aside. I wouldn't want to set the total amount. I guess what I'm thinking is if we were going to do anything, we could split it over 2 years. But there's certainly other avenues other than the municipality to get funds from. And certainly we were made aware of some funding from Hansel Co-op, and there is Trillium funding that they might also be able to tap into. And I don't know whether they have tried that or not. So I just like to see a little better business plan, what they want to do and how they're going to use it. And maybe investigate some other funding for their organization. And I guess deep down, part of the issue is they don't own the property that they're on. It's owned by the county. So how much money do you put into somebody else's property? I think initially we got started on this is because they were looking to raise funds to just pay for the taxes. And then all of a sudden we've kind of got into this. But it's a council decision, but I certainly don't want to see us with the whole amount at this particular time, I don't think.
So I think we'll just, we'll go through them all, and then, but to answer your question, Mr. Mayor, $152,000 for the Moncton Arena, that's not in our municipality, but I know where you're coming from. You said, how would you pay for somebody else's property? The Moncton Arena is $152,000 that we give Moncton. We own part of it, yes. So, no. Okay, so we're good. We'll move on to Mitchell Minor Sports, $3,000. It's a yearly fee that they get. Any questions on it? Seeing none. I got a line in my break. The Mitchell Optimist Club, $300 for pool donations used to pay for the, the Mitchell Optimist Club, the adjudicators, the venues, the awards, and the advertisement for the music festival. Are they having a music festival? Yes, they are. Any questions on it? We'll go to St. Clements Soccer, $500. It's a yearly event. The participation fee is low. Any questions on it? One of those. St. Mary's Health Foundation. There was a presentation, I'm going to say before, it would be in the fall, looking for $21,000. If everybody remembers, they come and say that that portion of people use the St. Mary's hospital. So they're looking for $21,000 as 3.5% of their hospital renewal project. I haven't seen much of that in the paper lately, but I assume it's going on.
And I can't recall, there was some information in the paper, another municipality, was it Zora, Jeff? There was another municipality that had discussed it, and they actually didn't support it. I guess, I'm not going to tell you what to do with that, but if you're going to support this, you better be prepared to support Stratford and support Seaforth as well, because certainly West Perth uses them all. So, traditionally we haven't supported healthcare systems. I think we're big into supporting what's in our own community, such as the Ritz Villa. We've supported it, and I think maybe at one point in time we have supported, certainly we support yearly with some tax relief to the medical center, which is in our own municipality.
Anyone else about the St. Mary's Hospital? Dean?
Through you, Mr. Chair. The same, my thoughts and comments are along the same vein as the mayor's. We have lots of other local needs that are more pressing than this one. I understand healthcare is important, but if our citizens that use the St. Mary's Hospital wish to support that effort, then they can do so, and they would perhaps derive a greater benefit with a charitable donation receipt than the municipality would. I think there's just way too many other items in the rest of the budget to consider that have a higher priority than this request. Thank you.
Sherry Bell?
If I remember right, last term of council, did they not come requesting for the last term of council? I think I remember them coming 4 years ago with a request, and I think we chose at that time to follow sort of Dean's sentiment that personally you're better off with a charitable donation than maybe I think we turned them down. Well, not turned them down, just chose to let the individual 4 years ago too, I think.
CAO Brick?
Yeah, I'm happy to just clarify the kind of precedent that we set with this. And I think Mayor McKenzie is correct that in the fairly long past, we made commitments to hospitals, and they were very long-term commitments and with annual contributions, and they were before the OMPF cuts, for a bit of context. In the last time we received, and I believe it was St. Mary's, and I think the sort of policy decision we made to deal with precedent at that point in time was that we didn't see the municipality as having a role in collecting taxpayers' dollars and deciding what charitable organization to give it to. It's a different scenario with the Ritz because of the economic impact, the direct economic impact, and I think the council satisfied themselves that there was a difference in that scenario due to the direct economic impact and their location right in West Perth. And I think what we've done in the past, which I don't want to leave St. Mary's unsupported, is we ensured that we promoted the fundraising campaign in our tax newsletter and on our website. We made it clear that we weren't able to contribute directly because we feel that it's better for people to self-choose where to make their charitable donations, but that we would encourage the community to, and we think it's important to communicate to the community that we didn't give money on their behalf, so they should make the personal choice to support charitable organizations in their community. And that communication, I think, is a big part of the choice to not support directly, but rather support the promotion.
Any other questions on the St. Mary's Health Foundation? Then we'll move on to the Upper Thames Elementary School Parent Council, and it was for the new playground equipment. Any questions or answers or discussion on it? Dean?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'd be supportive of this request, maybe not in the full amount, but it's set up for the use of the kids, the youth, and the community. So it's a viable request. A little bit different in the than the request from the Fish and Game Club, in the sense that we've already talked about a lack of a business plan and not retaining any ownership of the land. We don't retain ownership of the land, but we do have an indirect investment in our youth in the community. Thank you.
Ryan?
I was just going to ask if the school board contributes at all to that funding for the new playground equipment, or if that's just something that solely has to come not from the school board.
No, recreation at the province does not put any money into, help me out if I'm wrong here, anybody who's got a kid, they don't put any money into recreation at schools and playground. It has to be funded by, trying to think who the two ladies were. I think there's two ladies here. Justine Nader and came and made a presentation. We do have a reciprocating agreement on the arena and the halls at the schools, but nothing on the playground, because we use their soccer fields. They use our arena at no cost for their children's skating and whatnot. So, but not on the playground. Okay, so is that the bottom? I think we're going to go through them one at a time. We're going to go back up to the top as the clerk would he loves writing. He would love to write a motion for each one. So I've got to so the first one we had was the Broadhaven Chamber of Commerce. Everybody read at the bottom. We already approved at our other meeting. The $3,500 of the $8,000 was already approved. So this would actually be for a $5,000 to the Broadhaven Chamber of Commerce. And I would take a mover and a seconder. Moved by Dean Trentowski, seconded by Murray Rose. All in favor, or any discussion? All in favor? Carried. We'll move on to the Mitchell Fish and Game Club, which we have technically set aside already, I believe.
So perhaps what you'd like to do with that one is ask for a motion and a seconder, and then vote on that motion based on the discussion that we had. Because I think the motion that you would, the default motion would be that we approve the 10,000, but I think based on the discussion, you're expecting that would fail. So if you can look to your members of council for someone to make a motion about some compromise, perhaps they would make it. We're doing these individually, I believe.
Okay. Oh. For the Mitchell Fish and Game Club, it has up here, release the funds pending a submission of a business plan approved by council. That's how it's written. And a motion would be by Nicholas Vink, seconded by Cheryl Matheson. So the motion is that if they come with the business plan, we would still set that money aside. All in favor? And I guess I have to count. 1, 2, 3. That motion is defeated. So I guess the funds for will be taken out of the budget. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to say? Make a motion? Mayor McKenzie?
Well, we had indicated maybe we could split it over a couple of years, and I think keeping that in mind, again, it's hinging on they come back with a budget with a business plan, but maybe we could leave $5,000 in there, and then it would come back again next year. It would be split over a 2-year period. Oh, sorry.
Okay, so the Mayor McKenzie makes a motion that we put $5,000 aside if they come back with a viable business plan and possibly split it into a second year. Clerk, do you have that written down? So I'm not a very good talker. Do we have a seconder for that? Ryan Duck, all in favor of that motion? Carried. Thank you. We'll move on to, well, you got that in big writing. Mitchell Minor Sports, a yearly submission for $3,000. Motion to accept that donation to Mitchell Minor Sports. Councillor Bell, seconded by Councillor Duck. All in favor? Carried. The Optimist Club of Mitchell for $300 for their, I keep forgetting what it's called, music festival. I want to call it Sing Swing. Motion by Mayor McKenzie, seconded by Councillor Harold. All in favor? Carried. St. Columban Soccer, $500, our yearly mount. Can I have a motion for that? Cheryl Matheson, Councillor Bell. All in favor? Carried. The St. Mary's Health Foundation. Would we have anybody forward a motion to donate them $21,000? Councillor Matheson, a seconder? Seeing no seconder, that motion is defeated. Upper Thames Elementary School, Parent Council, $10,000 for playground equipment. Do we have a motion to put that in the budget? Councillor Rose, a seconder. Councillor Vink. All in favor? 1, 2, 3. Carried. And then the small discretionary requests. I must have missed that one on the sheet. It's for $1,000. I believe that would come under Mr. Hobson.
Cover it, Dan. So the and Dan's going to tell me I should turn my camera on. I don't know how to on this screen. So the policy calls for a small discretionary amount, and that's why the $1,000 is in there for requests on the fly.
So we would have a motion for that still. We need a motion for the $1,000. Would that be for like the boys win OMHA and that? Yes, it would be. Do we have a?
It's not for medals, but it is for, during the year, we often get a request for pool passes, for example, for the fair. And we've made a decision that, there is a loss of revenue there to the recreation department. So we wrote the policy to have $1,000 of discretionary money to deal with those requests that aren't put through the formal request process. But we have had a history of approving that type of request.
Councillor Duck will make that motion. A seconder. Councillor Rose, all in favor? Carried. So that portion of our donations is done. Everybody with me? 4.1.7, scenario options. That would be Wendy. I will shut my mic off.
Thank you, Chair. So this scenario, here, let me just share my screen first. Sorry, I'll share my screen. Let's move it down. So in this report, I kind of gave a scenario based on a 9% levy increase, and just with some options on what reserves to make that 9%. So it would be an additional draw of reserves of just a little over $1 million. And then I gave some options farther down, 3, 5, 9, 13, 15, and a 20.56% scenario, all with a sliding scale of how long it would take to flatten out that ask of 1.7 million. And then also it kind of showed what the percent would mean in a dollar value. So a 9% levy increase would equate to $101 for residential property using the median value. So let me just, I'm going to switch over to my scenario here. So this spreadsheet is interactive for you. And here I'm going to reduce the amounts for the donations, and then we'll start at that base. And then if you want to have a discussion or want a scenario presented, I can do that here on the spreadsheet.
And when you have a moment, Wendy, if you could just size that screen, optimally size that screen for the monitors. It's zoomed in a little too far.
So Wendy's going to make that a little smaller on our screen so that we can, well, I guess you can see it on the sidewalls. I don't have the interactive one. Questions for Wendy or senior staff about the budget? So she's given 6 options there of amounts. We'll go around. Dean.
Oh, I thought you were going to go around the horseshoe or around the circle. Okay. I guess maybe this question should have been asked earlier, but I didn't want to wait till the end. Going back to the capital project for the Ketterson Park, so this would be a question for Darcy. Somewhere I've got information here that the expected budgeted tender price for the upcoming project, that's the tender calls out now, is 1.3 million. We've set aside already money in reserve from the municipality. We have funding from the upper tiers of government. The balance was to be covered under donations, and we had targeted $250,000 as the target amount that we were looking towards the public to provide that part of the funding. So my question to staff is, what happens if our donation target isn't met and there's a balance to be paid? Then how are we going to address that shortfall should there be such a shortfall?
I'll offer a high level answer, and then Darcy may want to get down into where we're at with fundraising so far. We believe the $250,000 fundraising target, which we shared with the original grant, spoke to council about, we believe that's a reasonable target for the project. We're not expecting the fundraising, particularly the individual plaques and some of the naming, to take off in a real meaningful way until we actually have the tender let and we start to break ground and we have a more tangible project for people to contribute to. We're off to a good start with fundraising with a few naming items, and if council would like any specifics on the amounts, I think Darcy can provide a quick summary on that. But I think if we do find, as we approach the end of the year, the completion of the project, and we haven't closed our fundraising target, and it is a target, you very accurately point out it's a target, we would have to look at how we would make up that difference. We could extend the fundraising into a following year. We could add additional sponsorships. So for example, I know trees are selling really, really well, and we had a defined number of them. We could adjust the fundraising plan as we go. And as a final resort, if we've exhausted the fundraising options, we would then have to look at whether we would cover the balance from a reserve or whether we would set levy aside in a future year's budget. So I will straight up acknowledge that when you have a community fundraising component, we don't have a guarantee. We certainly would have options if we didn't meet the community fundraising component, but I feel this is a very supportable local project.
Darcy?
Yeah, I would second Jeff, and just I think he kind of asked. Right now, just for council's information, we're sitting right around the $20,000 mark as money that is came in from donations, sponsorships, and naming rights. And I mean, we're pretty early on in the campaign. I know it still seems like a large hill, and as Jeff stated, it is a target, but I think we have got a pretty good start.
One thing I didn't mention as well, I would mention for the benefit of council, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Darcy, but there were pledges, if not already donations made by, I think it was a slow pitch team at least, and perhaps another one where those, and we haven't included those contributions towards data. So we have a number of slow pitch teams doing fundraising. They'll get back to live tournaments or get back to tournaments again this year, and we expect that'll fill a part of the fundraising package.
Yeah, there is actually even some money sitting in our reserve that isn't accounted for in that 20,000 that was donated. I think it is going to turn into a sponsorship or a naming right, but that money is there, and I can't say the exact amount, but I think it was over 10,000 as well.
Mayor? Yes. You had a question? Yes. Yes, from a slow pitch tournament, the Grizzlies, and I forget how much it was, but I believe it was 10,000. Yeah. So yeah.
And I don't work very good together when we're not sitting beside each other. I knew we received some money for it. Dean, does that answer some of your? I know it's a great unknown. All fundraising is.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I realize there's more questions than answers, and I guess that's why I'm raising the questions now, because obviously this is a item that needs to be monitored as we progress through. So, and it's a significant item that needs that requires attention. 250,000. I think Wendy's number to date, 1% tax levy equates to 87,000. So it's 250,000 is a significant number to keep track of as the donation campaign continues. So my only other question for staff right now is, what's the critical milestone date that we reach where we have to pay for the work, and then we would realize where we're at with our funding side of the equation. So if the work is to start later this spring, I think the tender's out now. So what's the anticipated completion date of the project? And more importantly, what's the anticipated final payment due date where we would have to pay for the project in its entirety to the contractor?
Sorry, I beat you to it. I beat you to it, Deputy Mayor, right? Or Budget Chair, right? It's a great question about critical milestones. The first critical milestone will be reporting back to council on the results of the tender. And we're obviously optimistic that our budget estimate is realistic, but we're going to, that report will come at the second meeting in April, which I believe is April 19th. The Tuesday will be the first critical milestone where council gets updated on what the project budget looks like, and therefore the fundraising number becomes more clear. The following critical milestones will be, and council will have to decide at that point in time if they choose to proceed or not. I think we all know when we tender, we really want to be serious about proceeding. In this particular project's case, with the 70% leverage of our provincial and federal grant component is over $800,000. I think it would be a very difficult decision to leave that money on the table and not match it at the rate that we could find money at to complete this critical project to make that an even more world-class facility than it is. So that decision will come to you April 19th for a decision on construction. And then you will see us obviously promote, have more promotion around milestone events with the project in terms of groundbreaking. we'll use those opportunities to promote the fundraising, and then we'll provide council with regular updates on fundraising. I don't expect that that project will be completed in the fall. I would think, given construction schedules, supply chain issues, that that project will likely fall into the spring of 2023. And I don't anticipate that we will be finalizing the contractor invoices and doing final payments until into 2023 because of that. But again, I think there will be regular updates on the fundraising. And I think you can all imagine that as we see a manifest structure and we have a better graphic of what the fundraising, it's a marsh with a heron, looks like, I think we'll see an increase in success of our $500 plaques.
Thank you, Jeff and Dean. Okay, we'll move. Does anybody else have any questions? Because we are going to end up, Councillor Harold.
I have a question about on the operations side. Is there enough room on the operations side to absorb some extra cost for snow removal for some additional sidewalks if in later summer when Mike proposes the route, if there's appetite to increase the amount we're doing by some degree? I don't know what that would be at this time. But maybe all the 5-foot sidewalks or the newer 5-foot ones, I don't know. But is there coverage in that budget to take a bit more?
Mike Kramer, are you on? There you are.
Yeah. Currently, we've decreased the snow budget in your report there. As of right now, we are just planning on staying status quo regarding the sidewalk snow removal. We might be potentially adding a section up towards the golf course just because of we received a couple of complaints this winter regarding getting the kids to school. That's the only area in Mitchell that the kids are currently 100% walking to school. So we have that little bit of money in there to cover that cost. And we don't have enough money in the budget. I think it was presented at over 200,000 to do the rest of the 5-foot sidewalks and the additional sidewalks east to west.
Thank you, Mike. Steve, do you have a follow-up at all? I don't know what exactly we passed as a council for that.
I think Operations Manager Kramer has provided you, we didn't add extra service into the budget. We were obviously focusing on, with the budget number, service reductions. That stretch of sidewalk that Mike mentioned is one that I think we can cover. And if no extra money is added to this budget, I think it may be a year where council reviews more closely when we bring the sidewalk route at the time when we approve our winter operations plan about whether there are incremental changes or optimizations that we can make in that route. That conversation could happen through the approval of the winter operations plan. And I don't recall the exact date, but I think it's August or September that that's brought. And that, but I think there's no wholesale addition of extra kilometers in this budget.
Yep, that's good. Thank you. Other budget questions? Mayor McKenzie?
Okay, and I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus here by any means. And I'm looking at our two largest contributors to our budget, recreation, and the other one is basically operations or transportation. Recreation has been impacted through COVID, through loss of revenue, and that's had a big impact there. My question is, and I'm not sure if I'm addressing it to Wendy or maybe to Mike, what would 1% off of your budget, what impact would that have on the municipality? What would you be looking at?
Wendy's looking for paperwork. Mike, do you have something on operations?
So I'm not sure what Walter's direct question is. Like 1% equals 87,000, correct?
Yeah, 1% is 87,000 in our budget. Yeah. So if you had to take 87,000 out of your budget, what would it look like, I guess, Mike?
So I have in my capital budget, I can't really, this year for capital, we're doing that one extra section of road, but we're taking and subsidizing that by and through reserves. The other option that you have, you can take 25,000 out of the sidewalk replacement program that has been in the capital works program since amalgamation. But because we're doing that extra street of Henry Street with currently no sidewalk, we can allocate that 25,000 into those costs for that project. But otherwise, we're basically just right now covering our costs. Snow removal the last 2 days will probably have a huge impact on my decision to cut the winter operations budget by another 90,000. Gravel costs are considerably up. I'm grateful that we've entered into a 3-year contract. However, in 2024, we're going to have a very scary number. And the additional costs for contractors, vendors, materials, and the big one this year is fuel. So I'm probably underestimated my cost of my fuel budget, but it's going to be what it is. Other than that, we're just providing basically the same status quo levels of service, other than deciding to do less. We have, I don't know what to cut. We could be doing tree removals and tree cleanups for the next 20 years if you want to cut back on doing some of that stuff. However, wages are wages, and so those are a constant. They're going to be doing one activity or another. So other than that is just letting our assets decrease and get into a worse state of condition that they currently are in.
I'll just add to that answer from Operations Manager Kramer that we went through the budgets and Mike and other managers cut projects, both capital and operating, and cut standard operating wherever we could to get down to the number we had. I don't want to diminish that exercise, and if council has seen anything in the budget that they think is more, we're essentially cutting into service level at a certain point. But the other choice, and the reason that we have this graphic on the screen on the monitors for the councillors is that if 1%, you can look at the different scenarios that come up in that graphic. If you're not going to, one choice is reserves, but you have to recognize that the implication is double. If you take more from your reserves, immediately those reserves are further depleted. And secondly, the levy requirement, 1% less, is not there for next year as the base. So that's precisely the reason for this analysis that's on the screen about looking at the consequences of increases or decreases and the impact on reserve and future levy impacts.
Yep. Okay. And thank you, Mike, for your answer. I guess the point I was trying to prove here is that really there is no place to take any more off of, and in order to do that, I had asked the question. Like I said, I wasn't trying to throw anybody under the bus here.
Councillor Matheson.
I guess I just want a little bit of clarification on the actual chart that's up on the screen right now. The bridging number of years, that gap, is there have you built in the cost of living into those if they're extended beyond 1 year, 2 years? There's a 6.8 year to bridge the gap, and it's saying that it's a 3% increase. It's a 3% increase rate, but is that calculating in?
No, sorry, there wasn't any inflation built into the model. So we know that inflation for 2023 is probably going to be high just based on the current state of the economy with the price of fuel and the price of food. It was hard to kind of put a guess in there. So this is just straight up what the requirement is today, and if the requirement never changed, this is if a 3% increase would look like it would take 6.8 years, but with no inflation and no change to the budget.
Other questions, Nicholas?
So I think I'm coming in feeling comfortable at about the 5% mark. So having a levy increase at about 5%. So if we take advantage of the $113,000 in tax growth that we had this year, that would, my math would put it at about 3.5% for each taxpayer. So the levy increase could be at 5%, bridge the gap over the next 4 years to get to where we need to be. And then this year's tax increase to the taxpayer would be about 3.5 and a little bit percent, taking advantage of the growth that we have. So that's where I about feel comfortable myself at a 5% levy increase.
Wendy, anything to say about that?
Do you want me to put that model up and show you what it would look like? Okay, 1 second.
So Wendy can change the numbers verbatim, whatever we think, so that we can see. Wendy, can you change the cost per household on my computer on the right too? We just, like you have, okay, so at 5% it would be $48.51 for a house valued at X. I don't know if she can do that too. It'll all change it here, so we'll have a better view.
Yeah, I'll just take a few seconds here to make the changes from the donations and then throw in that 5%, which is, I think, I'll find out what the exact reserve draw would be, and then it'll show what the percent would look like for the levy and what it would look like for the tax rate, and then what it would look like per property class. So just give me a couple of minutes here and I'll switch things on my screen.
Does anyone else have any questions while she's doing this? And this is where we can go around the circle. And if you have any general questions, because Mike can answer them, Jeff can answer them while she's doing it. Ryan?
No, I'm okay for right now. Thanks, Deputy Mayor.
Councillor Tam, you're good. The Dean?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my question or my line of thought was similar to Councillor Vink, who should be, as much as I don't want to say that, we have to aim for towards 5% a target on the levy. So I guess my general question was, what can we do in any way, shape, or form to reduce our capital spending? We talked about the donations, we've addressed that. What can we do to reduce our operational costs, and what can we do to draw more from reserves? It's going to be a combined effort. There was a podcast I listened to recently over the weekend. They said the causes of inflation were twofold: monetary policy that's set by a central bank policy, and the other cause of inflation was government spending, and that's us, what we're talking about right here. So yeah, so Wendy's working on that, and that's the question I had, is what can we do to try and get it closer to a 5% target instead of 9%? Thanks.
Wendy's got hers done, so we'll stop the circle and we'll let Wendy make her representation.
Okay, so 5% would mean an extra draw of reserves of 1.3 million, that number right here. And then it would essentially, here's your increase per property. So the levy would go up 5%, but your tax rate goes up 3.6. And so a residential property median value of 238 would be $48.51 increase for the year.
So everybody has a small chance to absorb that. Murray, do you have any budgetary questions?
Well, I agree that nobody wants the taxes to go up, but being last year, they didn't go up in my mind like they should have. And everybody thought it was okay when it did come that they could go up and nobody would have any issue with it. I'm thinking instead of pulling 13 and a half out of reserves, if we go 9%, we just pull a lot less out of reserves. And the pain is bad, but it's over in a little over 2 years, 2.5 years, as opposed to drawing it out, because we know in another couple of years, am I saying it properly, MPAC? We're going to get hit with that as well. So if we could get this out of the way, because there's another big increase coming when they reevaluate our homes and farms.
Which one, Wendy or you want to explain the impact?
So the MPAC answer is, and so it's a great observation, Councillor Rose, that we need to ready ourselves for MPAC. So where the position we've been in with MPAC has been the agricultural reassessment was done, phased in, and then when they were supposed to do the residential reassessment, COVID hit, and they've delayed it twice. I think we all know from the real estate market, without a lot of detailed thought or analysis, that there will be a shift in assessment value for residential, which will increase the weight that residential takes out of our budget. And so while the previous 4 years, and in fact this last 2 years, because of the failure to bring residential in, the agricultural community's been carrying a little heavier load, that will be corrected. And you will see the residential assessments per household go up more than the agricultural. That's coming. It'll come as soon as the assessment starts and the phase-in period starts. But I do want to point out that just because your house might double in value, and frankly, that's not an unrealistic number, it doesn't mean your taxes will double, because the municipality still has the same taxation need. And so there will be a redistribution, but it won't double. And there will be a slightly higher increases for residential than for agricultural, but you wouldn't see a doubling, because our overall requirement's still the same, and it's growing by the levy requirement amount.
Go ahead, Murray.
So if we were to do the 5% as was offered, does that mean in 4.1 years, all that money's that's out of balance, so to speak, that will all be wiped up and cleaned up, correct? And there will only be pulled out 1,354,000 and change out of reserves. That's a one-time thing, or is that an every year thing?
That's a good question. So essentially this would mean that the levy gets increased at 5%, gets increased at $435,000 each year. So it's a slow increase and more draw on reserves. So if next year we're looking at this same scenario, your 10 million would be 10.8 instead of 10.4, and we'd still be looking for additional funds to come from reserves.
Murray?
So would it be fair to say with the 5%, it's not as painful all at once, but we end up losing more reserves as opposed to doing it at 9? It's going to hurt, but then it's done and we're done with it. Is that a fair analysis?
Essentially, we need to make up that 20%. And so even at 9%, you're looking at that for a 2-year period. So it would be this year and 2023 at 9%. But that's, I don't have a crystal ball to tell you what the inflation is going to be next year or the budget pressures for next year. And so it is a little bit conservative in saying 9 will be this year and next year. And then, or if we use the 5% model, it'd be 5%. And then 2023, you'd be looking at a 13% increase again to make up that 20. So essentially you need to add the 2 columns, E and A, need to kind of equal or get close to that 20%. Does that help?
Councillor Harold? Councillor Vink?
I think if we haven't saved reserves for an event like this one, then what have we saved them for? Each year now with inflation, reserves are worth less and less every year. So let's take a little bit of advantage of the savings that the West Perth taxpayers have done here at the municipality in taxes and utilize that to bridge the gap just a little bit further, because we can't see out that far to know what's going to happen. So spread that out, take advantage of the reserves that we have now, and buffer that just a little bit longer at 5% and for 4 years.
Councillor Bell? Nothing. Councillor Matheson?
I tend to concur with Councillor Vink. I think that seems like a lot over the 4 years, but we also can't predict what's going to happen in 4 years. But we're also going to see a bit of a growth here in West Perth, which will also help with the tax base. So I think, spreading it out a little thinner than in the next 4 years would maybe be better than hitting in the 2 years.
Mr. Mayor?
Well, I guess I would agree with what's been said around the table. I was looking at the numbers and 5%, 9%, you could pick a number in between too, and you would shorten your length of time down. And I forget the municipality that was on the news this morning. I think they came in at 6.6. And the comment was made that was the highest in Midwestern Ontario of a levy. So I'm quite happy with what's been said. The only and Jeff's going to know what I'm going to say now. The only comment that I would make is that in future years that we don't do any pre-approval until we know exactly where we're at with the budget, and be sure of where we're at before we make the pre-approvals. And I think in another year we'll have a better handle on earlier in the year where we're at. So I don't see that as a problem. But we probably wouldn't have pre-approved as much as we did this year if we'd have known what we know now.
Well, luckily I get the last talk, but I'm not supposed to say anything. So I was thinking if we want to take a 5-minute recess, you can get up and Wendy will have it all fully prepared for a presentation when we come back. But out of the 2, 4, 6, 8, Anna Marie's not here. The 8 people who have spoke, I believe the majority of them, nine people that have spoke, the majority of them are looking at that 5%. But I don't want to put words in your mouth because we'll bring it back. but I was wondering if you could do the 5 and you could do the 7 and bring that back in 5 or 6 minutes whenever you've got it done. And we can have a look at the length of time in that. Is that suitable with everybody for 5 minutes to, well, we don't have any coffee because of Jeff, so we can just stand up, stretch your legs, and Wendy will get that on the screen. All right, so we'll have a recess.
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
All right, we're back from our 7-minute break, as Walter calls it. So we'll have Wendy put up the two scenarios on the screen. So the two scenarios she's put forward are, help me out, Wendy. The top one is 5%, and the bottom one is 6%, and your tax rate on 5% would be 3.6, and on the 6 would be 4.59. So a quick, everybody have a minute to digest that? Wendy, go ahead.
Sorry, we made 3 options. Sorry. We made a 5, a 6, and a 7. And then you can just see a 5%, the increase is so basically a 5% levy increase equates to a 3.6 increase in a tax rate. And then here's your increase kind of, again, by the property type, by the median value. 6% levy increase equates to a 4.59 tax rate increase. And then again, here's your changes per property for the year. And then the 7 levy increase equates to 5.57% tax rate increase. And then the annual increase again is on the side. So I'll try and see if I can one of those. Can you see those two?
Nicholas?
Have you guys approved the budget at County Council yet? And if you had, do you remember what percentage it has for levy and or taxes?
I'll pass that to Wendy because I asked. No, what they're waiting. We're waiting on our budget at the county to approve the percentage. We still have to bring that forward, whether we would lower the farm tax percentage. But did you get a number today, Wendy? A rough? No. She had phoned Corey Bridges and asked him, Walter, can you? We did. Yeah, it's about 5%, I do believe. 5.87, according to our clerk. Thank you. Mike, Tam?
2 questions, Wendy. So if we go with the 6%, is it conveyed as 6% or 4.59 because we're actually using the growth?
There we go. So if the 6% means the levy increased by 6%, but your tax rate is only increasing by 4.59, and yes, there's growth in there.
Second thing, just a minor thing for another budget year probably, but I noticed like on page 25 in the report on the reserves, some of them don't seem relevant anymore. Are we going to go through all those reserve funds and see what's, like, some of these committees don't even exist?
We would like to. We've been just focused on the prior years, and so now that they're somewhat cleaned up, we can start looking forward to putting financial strategies in place and bring forward some recommendations on the reserves and kind of marry up some things so that there's a financial plan in front of you and what the reserves mean. And yes, we can consolidate those so that they're meaningful.
Dean, you had a question?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Earlier before the break, Wendy, you mentioned that a 5% levy increase would result in an added draw of 1.3 million from reserves. What under the 6 and 7% levy increase scenarios, what would the required draw be from the reserves in those 6 and 7% scenarios?
Okay, just give me 1 second here to bring that up. So that's okay. So 5% would be 1.3. Can you see that, or maybe make it bigger? So yeah, roughly 1.3 for 5%, 1.2 for 6, and 1.1 for 7.
Are there any other questions? I guess this is kind of the last call. So, as council, we have to make a decision tonight. So I would entertain a motion on one of the 3 scenarios, unless somebody has another scenario they would like to propose in a motion. Nicholas?
I'd move that we approve the operating capital budgets at a total levy requisition of 9.141 million. And that turns out to be a levy increase of 5%, and direct staff to prepare that bylaw.
Do we have a seconder for that motion? And then we'll get it read back. Mike Tam, can we have the motion read back, please, to everyone?
That the Council of the Municipality of West Perth approves the 2022 operating and capital budgets with a total levy requisition of $9,141,092.10, which results in a levy increase of 5% and a tax rate increase of 3.6%, and directs staff to prepare a budget and rate bylaw.
Everyone understand? So we'll call the vote. All in favor of a 5% with a 3.6? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Carried. I'll have to read if there's anything else here on my confirmatory bylaw. Treasurer has a question.
Would I just be able to get some clarification on what reserves you guys would like that draw to come from? In the scenario, I made some recommendations, being let me just switch to that page. Sorry, there was some funds to come out of the tax stabilization fund, insurance fund, some from bridge and some from roads. Just wondering if I could get clarification on what reserve and the amount. So the total value of the reserve draw would be $1,328,716.90, and so we'll have a spreadsheet here, and if we can get that tallied up, and then we'll be able to put a motion together.
Okay, apparently on page 20, so there's six reserves we can take part out of it. How do we do a motion on this? Take 16% out of each one? Can't do it that way.
So Wendy, is your recommendation as it's laid out on page 20, is that the recommendation that you're making, or you need more clarification?
On page 29, in my 9% example, there was a scenario to make the 1 million, and so the levy draw is more than that. So I need more direction or if you're comfortable with the reserves that I recommended, being the tax stabilization at 150,000, insurance stabilization at 20, and then it would just be kind of a different capital reserves that we can use. And the reason I chose the tax stabilization was because the long-standing treasurer would always start the budget cycle with approximately 120 to 150,000 as a surplus, but that was an estimated surplus. And with the change in this tax stabilization reserve, it is for this purpose. And the interest from the principal protected note was put there, and there's 295,000 there. So bringing 150, I felt was comfortable, but there is 295 in that reserve.
I was gonna say that you have $1,006,484 already brought forward. We need an extra, how much? 322,000 approximately. Wendy, what do you best decide we take it out of?
I would say take it out of your tax stabilization fund, so we can deplete it, and then we can take more out of the roads, just a little bit to make up the difference. We are anticipating a surplus, and so when that comes back, we can look at either adding back to these reserves where we took them out of, so that next year we'll have a tax stabilization fund to draw from.
Well, we have the clerk here working on a motion for this. He's clicking in that. So Wendy recommends we empty the levy stabilization, which is what the stabilization reserve would be for. And then we will have to replenish it as time goes on. And the rest to be a little bit you save from the roads construction reserve. So those would be, if everybody has it, there'd be, we'll have to know the exact numbers, I assume, for Daniel. Tax station.
Tax stabilization is 150,000 withdrawal. Insurance stabilization is a 20. No.
We'll send you the numbers to make it easier. Then you can put it up on the screen.
So Wendy or Monique's working on the numbers, and then we'll be able to put it up.
If I may, Doug, like Councillor Tam suggested, there's many reserves that aren't applicable anymore that we could utilize in the future. But for example, like the working reserve at 400,000, we could deplete that one this year as well too. And if we have, like Wendy suggested, a surplus, it can just go back in. So I think we're quibbling over nothing because we have already figured out that we're going to take it out. And Wendy's outlined reserve and reserve funds that what we have access to, what we have access to with legislation and by bylaw. And so we can just take it out of the reserves since we have access to that. I don't think we need to be quibbling over dollars out of reserves. We can figure that part out.
I believe the clerk will have something to say about that, but clerk?
I would actually defer to the treasurer because I think we would like to do a full review of the reserves before we can recommend to council to just withdraw from them without knowing exactly what they are or what conditions are around them. We could always revisit those reserves at a later date and replenish the draws from tonight, which administration is comfortable utilizing, if that makes sense to council.
I would agree.
Dean?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would be more comfortable with a more detailed approach and defining exactly where we're going to get the money from this time. And I agree with staff's recommendation that the monies in the other reserves be left where they are until they have a more comprehensive review of how those reserves function. The stabilization reserve's pretty clear how it works, so I'd have more comfort drawing the money from that, and then await staff's report on the other reserves at a later date.
Does the figures up on your screen here, does that do the job? That achieves the goal right there. So you want me to explain it or say it, or you? Go ahead, Wendy.
So essentially we're going to draw 295 out of the tax stabilization, and we're going to take 20,000 out of the insurance stabilization, 100,000 out of the road reserve bridges, and then the remainder of 913 716.90s to come out of the road construction reserves.
Vink?
But in your recommendation, you also included working reserve, and we didn't take anything out of the working reserve. So we could take 200,000 out of a working reserve and leave 200,000 in the road construction reserve.
I'm open to whatever council would like to do. It was just, that was what was recommended on page 29.
On page 20, you talked about the other ones that
Anybody have a calculator? Nick or Daniel says that's right, because you went from 913, 716.90 to 7. Again, we just said we wouldn't quibble about it because we're going to have to put it back. But does this suit to take the reserves out? I would look for a motion, I believe, to take the reserves out of the tax stabilization at 295,000, the insurance stabilization at 20,000, the roads reserve bridges at 100,000, the working reserve at 200,000, and the road construction reserve at $713,716.90 to achieve our taxation year. Can I have a mover for that? Councillor Vink, a seconder? Councillor Harold? So then this would finish our budget deliberations for the 2022 year. All in favor? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Carried. So that would end my portion of it, I believe, and I will hand the meeting back to Mayor Walter McKenzie to finish it.
Okay, thanks, Doug. Just before we do the confirmatory bylaw, oh, sorry, Murray? Oh, sorry.
Maybe I should have brought this up earlier. There's just one thing yet about the budget. Can I still talk about that, or is that passed? Okay. I was wondering, so far, did BDO ever explain, or whoever our people were, why this was not caught? And I'm not blaming Wendy. I'm just saying accidents happen. I realize that. But like, should we do a forensic audit to just make sure that everything is the way we think it is? Or is that normal or not normal? Or are we, I just want to make sure we're doing due diligence as a council, not that all of a sudden there's a kickback saying, well, how do you know it was like this? But I'm just asking the question.
And I'll let Jeff maybe field that one first, or well, it doesn't matter. Wendy wants to do it. I don't. Wendy's going to crack at it first. Okay, go ahead.
So the auditors don't audit the budget. And so they audit actuals, and they go through to make sure that everything is in compliance to accounting rules. And so they don't have any concerns on that side. The budget is an estimate, and I'm going to say that the process of Excel-based budgeting is difficult, and we're moving the budget into an application. Starting with this budget, we're going to backfill it. So we're hopeful that there'll be a little more time to do analysis versus data entry, and make it so that it's a smoother process for staff and for council.
I think my question was more not to do with the actual budget itself. It was that clerical error. Is there any way that they could have caught that, or that we can say absolutely that it was a clerical error, not that somebody comes to us and says, are you sure it was just clerical, or was there actually something more to it?
Yeah, I don't believe that there's any wrongdoings at all. Excel you can miss a formula. The formula can be kind of not in the right place when you're doing the budget, and we've seen that even in what I presented. One of the lines was hidden on the fields, and that was $115,000 in interest and penalty. And so Excel-based budgeting, there's a lot of in your binders, every tab is a sheet, and it's outside of the accounting package. So there is lacking that strength in knowing that your number is producing correctly. So hopefully with the accounting or with the application, it will make that less of an error. Errors can happen. And I think in this case, it was not having the financial records masked a lot, and not having the actuals. 2019 was closed in April of 2021. And so having that gap made it difficult to do a budget, and also to be able to prepare 2021's budget without 2020 books being done. Definitely makes it challenging to produce numbers when you don't have numbers to go by. Hopefully that answers that.
Okay, no, very good, Wendy. Good explanation. Okay, as I was going to say before, just before the confirmatory bylaw, for the past over 2 years, we've been in a state of emergency. And I just wanted to let you know that as of April the 6th, we will be coming out of the state of emergency. And I guess it's maybe a sign that we're going to get a little closer to being normal. Not that COVID isn't still around, and we'll have to still take precautions, but we've taken direction, obviously, from the and they feel comfortable that that it's okay to come out, and we're following the province's lead. So just a heads up that we'll be doing that. I believe it's April the 6th is the date that we're going to sign that. So having said that, the next item then is the confirmatory bylaw, and it is that bylaw 29 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council and the corporation municipality of West Perth be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed this 29th day of March. Do we have a mover and seconder? Councillor Rose and a seconder, Councillor Bell. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. And finally, a motion to adjourn, and I don't have the time in front of me. 9:05 that we do adjourn. Moved by Councillor Trinkowski, seconded by Councillor Tam. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you.